Yes, welcome everyone to this second session of the Leading Complexity program. So glad to be here with everyone. And tonight's speaker is someone I've been following since I think 2012, when you did his TED talk on the Wikispeed. So do justice. Welcome. You is a author of the Scrum Master book, published in 7 languages. He has worked with Bill Gates, the leadership team of Amazon. He has operated the Agile program at Tesla for Elon Musk, and he's the founder of Wikispeed, that became an example of an automotive design and product speed in a fun, egalitarian culture. And he enjoys collaboration as a board member, writing, teaching, and running companies to make a good future arrive faster. So we're super excited and super intrigued. I'm not only a fan of Wikispeed and Tesla, but also been following you. So very welcome.
You're amazing to say that, Michael. Yeah, if you put whatever I've done in the absolute best possible terms, maybe it sounds like that. So let me reintroduce myself. I'm Joe. I'm from a little farming town in the middle of America called South Bend, Indiana. It's famous for football, and I don't play football. So I mean, maybe I'd like to, but I'm not skillful enough for how well people play it there. So like, I'm from a little farming town in not a well-connected area, and I got really lucky. My first serious job, I went to a not very famous university. I really liked it. It was good for me at the time, but it's not famous. I didn't go to Harvard or MIT or Oxford University in England or any. I went to the University of Wyoming. Also a small state school. It's known for fossils. It's so remote that there's dinosaur digs nearby. And they have a wonderful fossil museum. And I studied computer engineering. It was renamed computer science while I was there. I mean, that's how, like, in a way, behind the times this little state school is. So they weren't sure if we were going to be building silicon or if we were going to be programming. Like, they hadn't decided, right? Now, the advantage of that is I did take some material science and mechanical engineering courses, because it was a mixed curriculum, as this tiny little mountain school figured out what software development was. And I swore the oath of the engineer that we are going to build products that people's lives depend on, and we're going to do our absolute utmost to make them worthy of people putting their lives trust in. This is for people who'd build bridges and things, but as a software developer, I had that oath. I was actually the last graduating class to still take the oath of the engineer. And maybe that helped. Maybe that helped a lot, even though it was a software development intended major, because I did end up becoming a full-time employee in Tesla. And that changed my life. Some of you have seen talks I've given earlier. In fact, I'll share a screen. Let's see if this is shareable. Michael put a YouTube video on LinkedIn just yesterday, and I think some of you may have even watched it, depending on how much your available time was. I'll share this screen. Does anybody see a colorful set of 12 hexagons? Okay. So I operated Agile at Tesla. I actually founded the Agile program in Tesla and operated it and constructed this training curriculum while I was there. And I continue to improve it since then. So it looks quite a bit different, but the concepts are similar. It's a 12-step program, from annual budgets to real-time budgets and daily hardware introductions. Daily. Tesla introduces 60 new parts a day. That's about the rate of change that Volvo or BMW or Mercedes-Benz or Seat or Skoda or Honda or Toyota or General Motors or Ford. It's about the pace that those companies introduce new product every 2.5 years. Tesla does daily. And I'm not here to say Tesla is the best company on planet Earth. I retired. I'm no longer there. But I will say I've never seen anything innovate as fast, ever. And this 12 hexagon plan is the best I know how to articulate that. Some of you already saw the YouTube overview of this. So that's not the intention of my course today, to go through this content. What Michael and I talked about leading up to this event is, how does leadership work in the Musk companies? And this is a particularly challenging question because the Musk companies are so different. I've made a gamified workshop here. I'll change screens pretty dramatically. A gamified workshop to try to make it even processable how different leadership is when you're doing something like what Elon Musk is doing. Now this is still in development. This course is run by request only for private customers because it's really not done. I have to talk to it and try to specify it. It doesn't stand on its own yet. But maybe a concept I could zoom in on is this idea of Agile DNA. Maybe some of you saw what Scrum at Scale was or has become. I was one of the original contributing authors, and it's maybe the best I understood at the time. It was actually authored by Alex Brown out of a series of interviews Alex had with me, and I contributed at that time, the modular architecture of Scrum at Scale. And the idea was you'd connect teams to some type of central group where they'd pull goals from. And I kept trying to make it compatible with a flat organization, and actually got in arguments with Jeff Sutherland about that. Jeff really wanted hierarchical, investor-driven Scrum, and I didn't understand that. You always have a delay state when you're waiting on escalating up or some type of hierarchy. So if you could, you'd want flat for speed reasons. So we moved past Scrum at Scale to some type of Agile executive model. And that made it even more hierarchical and actually made it even more slow. You had multiple levels of scrums and meta scrum and that kind of thing. What I discovered in Tesla was actually really similar to what I'd been doing in my hobby company, WikiSpeed. Now, WikiSpeed was much more casual than Tesla. We built cars like the one behind me. That's a car that we designed and built together and raced on different racetracks around the world. Tesla does something that I'll try to call Agile DNA. They put a set of rules in everyone's head in the first few hours you're hired. It's actually a 4-hour onboarding event. It's very intense. And in summary, it's you have no manager, never wait for feedback. You're not going to get any communication. You have no annual review. You're never going to be promoted. Each day you need to come into the facility and find how you can support the company mission and do it immediately. No one's going to thank you. We're going to trust you completely. You can spend money. Everyone around you is trusted as well. So don't second guess them. But if you do something intentionally bad, we are going to eliminate you immediately. And that's how you maintain this high trust environment. That actually sounds really low trust, the last part. In fact, the onboarding talks about you getting fired at least 10 times. The result, however, is that the people who are left are extremely high trust. So, you know, everybody there, the 110,000 people that are there, they have this DNA that they're going to operate without any commands given to them. It's very much like a special forces model where you are going to find people and organically solve problems, and people will find you the next day. You will find different people the next day. There's truly almost no structure. And I think the only reason that works is because I'll call it Agile DNA. You've been told from the moment you're hired, you are trusted, operate without information. No one's going to tell you what to do. It is your job to find out how to contribute to the company. And what seems to evolve is there's no center to the company, not even Elon Musk. It's very much like a molecular structure with no center, if even this. I mean, really, it's teams free floating in a fluid. It's much more like if you looked at a cell under a microscope, a living cell of a tree or a human or a raccoon or whatever. There's nutrition flying every direction. There's organelles that have formed, and they're inside this loose cell wall or cell membrane that is Tesla or SpaceX. And the idea of leadership is non-standard. So what does that actually mean? Here's back to the digital transformation board. this is what I would call the absolute most advanced course I do. I'm going to scroll down to a series of post-it notes I made just for this session with Crisp to try to hit the most important points. There are managers in the Musk companies, and who's in those roles rotates more than one time a day. They have no higher pay. They have no higher authority. What they have is higher accountability. So the training to become a manager, so a manager doesn't mean what most of us would usually think it means. The training to become a manager is an app on your phone, and everyone gets that app the moment you're hired, part of the digital self-management suite. And anyone who's completed that app is now eligible to join the pool of managers. And what that means is you join the rotating pool of people who are legally responsible if something really bad happens. You'll have to fill out the legally required reports by whatever municipality, state, or government entity you're in. And that's it. That's your additional perk. Your pay doesn't go up. You don't get to tell anybody what to do. It means you've taken responsibility. Maybe that's why who is in the manager role rotates as often as more than one time a day. But the result is you really get a company feeling that's flat, where anyone feels that they can do anything, and you feel empowered. Now, this is true of even high levels of accountability, like your health and safety officer or plant manager. I should clarify something. Most companies have a beautiful, clean building where decisions are made, and then another building that may or may not be beautiful or clean where software is developed, and then a typically dirty building where stuff is physically made. Tesla just has one type of building. They have many buildings, but there's just one type of building. The same building is where software is written. The same building is where decisions are made. The same building is where things are built, and not separate areas with glass walls between them. You're in one big open concrete space using the same bathroom. In fact, my claim to fame is when Elon Musk retweeted me. And what Elon Musk chose to focus on is, I did a talk on what it's like to work in Tesla and what the Agile in Tesla is like. A technical analysis of Agile at Tesla for an educated audience of professional Agile coaches and transformation agents includes an early definition of the Musk model and Group Scrum and Joe DX, etc. And Elon Musk replied, everyone eats the same food, uses the same restrooms, etc. No executive chef or other ivory tower stuff. There shouldn't be this workers versus management two-class system. Everyone is a worker. And I'll say that exactly matches my experience, for better and for worse. The working conditions continually got better. Teams would self-organize to add beauty, usability, elegance to the factory. The factory is the product and is treated to elegant design iteratively. So it gets better. The paint gets better. The temperature gets better. The hallways get quieter as the fans are replaced by better sound deadening. But it's still a rough factory. So think of the most intense or dirty or noisy part of a factory. You have that too. So you have ovens for paint to cure the paint on cars. And I have a very vivid memory of using a tool a lot like a jackhammer to knock off kilograms and kilograms of cured caked paint out of the inside of the paint ovens. They weren't hot at the time, but I mean, this is the type of work everybody does. You rotate through. And part of what makes this still inspiring is Elon Musk does it too. So the wealthiest person on planet Earth owns no house. Elon sleeps in a sleeping bag in the factory and works in the factory physically 12 hours a day. Whereas most of us, when we write software or make wonderful consulting decisions or create models of how Agile could scale, we often do it from a nice office. Musk sleeps in a sleeping bag in the factory. And instead of us working hard to make someone's financial dividend greater, or so someone can buy a larger yacht, you're doing it for someone who's working as hard or harder than you. And that's very inspiring. There's a principle in Lean where you would never have someone with a high skill level do low skill level work. It'd be one of the wastes. one of the Muras, etc. The Musk companies don't do that. The Musk companies rely on inspiration. They rely on teamwork. They rely on an egalitarian culture to a level I have not experienced otherwise. And that's the one point Elon chose to stress about all of my work. So thank you, Elon. Apparently that's important to Elon too. So managers rotate multiple times a day, all roles, even high accountability roles like health and safety officer. Anyone who's completed the training on their app can do it. The manager training is available on apps on everyone's phones. For more information about that, we could dive into the 12-step program, but we'll stay at summary level for now and see where engaged Q&A might take us. Far more intense than that is how good Tesla's AI is, Tesla's artificial intelligence. What Tesla AI is actually really good at doing is labeling things. You could think of it like looking at a picture, and Tesla Vision, particularly the auto labeler stack of Tesla Vision, is good at labeling. I see 2 kids. I see 2 kids on a bicycle. I see 2 kids holding a bicycle. I see 2 kids running. And this is the direction they're running in. And based on how they look, they're probably going to be here at this time. There's a physics model, a predictive physics model of inertia. Not a very complex one, but there is one. And that's based on labeling stuff. Well, auto labeler runs in the factory as well. And it labels everything. And that's what Tesla AI is actually really good at doing, is labeling stuff. It labels people by name, and your information about you is there all across the Tesla facilities all around the world, in Shanghai, in Brandenburg, Berlin, in the Netherlands, in the United States, in Texas, in California. You have these labels. And that feeds Tesla AI with a very clean data set of how stuff gets made, how people are swarming and mobbing on designing car parts, building car parts, dealing with supply chain issues. The AI, I'd say, is in general not so sophisticated. It's that the data is so clean and well labeled now. I mean, it took a long time to get to that level, but auto labeler is really good. And what that has done is allow a lot of the decisions that used to wait on management to be made by an app. So if one of us wanted to take vacation time, that's an app. That doesn't go to a human anymore. And it doesn't mean the app is perfect. It means it's at least not worse than a human committee or manager that would approve your vacation time. It still might make a mistake. In fact, some of you may know that's ultimately why I left Tesla. I couldn't get time off for my son's 3rd birthday. So I said, you're in good hands, you've got it. And I retired. I did early retirement. So it's not that the system's perfect, there are glitches, but it's not any worse than a set of humans trying to make time off decisions. And that's true for almost every type of decision that we typically would have waited on a management coalition to make. Like, which architecture is better? That's largely a problem to ask a computer. And when the data of how we've made the last 100 architecture decisions is very cleanly labeled through auto labeler from watching how humans actually tried to make those decisions, the suggestions are as good as the human suggestions were by now. A while ago, some of us may have said, there's no way an AI would be good enough to check our grammar in an email. Well, now in some cases and in some languages, AI is good enough to at least help us with our grammar in an email. It's not perfect, but it's actually pretty good. Well, some people still think there's no way an AI could coach an employee to be better at their job. I'll assert it can. And in fact, it does. So whatever we used to think management was is basically the digital backbone of the Musk companies. And many of you may know I'm very long on Tesla as an investor. I think the stock will just continue to rise and rise and rise. And I'm fairly invested in it myself on most days or most of the time. And this is why the fundamental digital structure of the company is very difficult to compete with. The speed of internal decision-making is basically instant. because almost everything I would have been asked to answer as a manager has been replaced by an app. Now, to be very clear, it's not one app. There's not like this cyber queen, awesome DNA, evil cyborg AI monster in space. Not yet, anyway. It's hundreds of different little apps for different types of decisions built on common AI components. I would estimate approximately half of total Tesla staff, so around 55,000 people, their primary effort is improving these AI stacks, the digitalization. It's a massive effort. And in fact, Tesla speed, that's a EU government term. A European Union government term is Tesla speed. We need to act with Tesla speed. I think it was a German EU delegate who proposed it first, and now it's tossed around the EU Parliament fairly regularly, it seems. Tesla speed seems to come from the level of automation, the ridiculous level of pretty good automation. And again, it's not perfect, but it seems to be as good as when we used to rely on humans for those things. So what do leaders actually do in the Musk companies? There aren't promotions, there aren't reviews. You're not asked to manage anything. People truly are self-managing in my experience, but because they have real-time feedback from apps, right? If we just told someone, you have high decision-making rights, but there's no quick feedback loop on the work, we'd just get chaos, right? So Tesla's digital support system, its digital self-management, seems to actually allow what a lot of us Agilists wanted about self-management. And the company ends up feeling almost entirely flat. So what's left for leaders to do? It looks like leaders are model contributors in the mobs doing the work. People who I had high respect for, like Elon, were in the mobs doing engineering. And I'd like to dive into one part of this 12-step program. Some of you may have seen this part before, my apologies, but I think it makes the point. Elon Musk is famous for a very deep level of understanding on a very wide-ranging set of issues. For example, Elon writes, "I'm a fan of Rust, a software platform, clearly scales well, given that Discord uses it. For maximum performance, however, nothing beats Type C, a programming language, with a customized compiler on specialized hardware. Important for maximum frame rate on vehicle inference computer. Otherwise, we mostly use C++ and Python." Okay, that's deeper than most high-level leaders of most companies would write. Well, we'll look at this one. Starship SN1 tank, preparing for Raptor, that's a rocket engine, attachment and static fire. Starship number 2 tank integration starts this week with much less circumferential pucker. That's a welding factor. Thanks, Fronius. That's an Austrian, highly accurate, AI-driven welding company. Elon's material science knowledge is actually quite deep. Elon's programming knowledge is actually quite deep. Elon's financial systems knowledge is actually quite deep. Elon's ability to manage or lead or deal with the legal implications of running 5 companies simultaneously globally is legendary. That's from joining the mobs. You don't get this level of understanding being a leader who looks at PowerPoint. You don't get this level of understanding from making PowerPoint. You only get this level of understanding, I think, from doing the engineering. And you don't have to be the best Python developer or the best C++ developer or the best Type C developer or the best welder. But Elon does all of those things, and so did I. You join different mobs constantly, and no one tells you which mob to join. You get this Agile DNA in the beginning, being told, go to wherever you think you can add the highest value, and where that is will change constantly. So try to figure it out. No one's going to tell you. Now, we Agilists like the idea of cross-functional. Wouldn't it be cool if a designer could also be an architect and could also be a developer and also be a tester. But most people say, no, you could never do more than one of those things. You can only do one. Much less also be really good at welding and X-ray inspection of welds and supply chain ordering and management. I think, no, that's impossible. I will assert most people I worked with in Tesla and at SpaceX when I visited SpaceX were that level of cross-functional. And I think Elon's advice here as a leader, as a model contributor, is exactly how this level of radical cross-functionality has emerged. Elon's advice on how to learn anything from an old Reddit, ask me anything. I do kind of feel like my head is full. My context switching penalty is high, and my process isolation is not what it used to be. Frankly, though, I think most people can learn a lot more than they think they can. They sell themselves short without trying. One bit of advice. It is important to view knowledge as a sort of semantic tree, a knowledge tree. Make sure we understand the fundamental principles, the trunk, and the big branches, so like physics and finance, before we add leaves or details like Python or friction stir welding or MIG welding or using auto bidder to help determine if you're getting a good deal in procurement. Or there's nothing to hang them on to. Now, something I'll add to that. Our trunk understanding, our understanding of physics and finance doesn't even have to be correct. Like we could have a bad understanding of physics or finance. We could be wrong. But as long as each thing we learn in the mob, we try to connect to that trunk, it's easier to remember. It's easier to compartmentalize it. There's a theory of memory that monks used to do when stations of the cross were walked. In this place, these activities are happening. And it was to remember the stories of the religious mythology of the day. There's the drawers of memory, the palace of memory system. It works if you connect whatever you're learning in the mob to a trunk, which is primarily physics and finance. It stays, it doesn't deteriorate as quickly. And in fact, you make cross connections much faster. Now, luckily, that trunk can and does improve over time. So our understanding of how physics works, our understanding of what financial systems might actually be, can and does improve over time. So you don't have to get that perfect or even good before trying to attach things to it. But if we just think of Python development as its own floating cloud, it will be difficult to be cross-functional with architecture when you're setting up compute centers. But if we think of the architecture of a compute center a lot like hyperthreading, we get architectural patterns that are at the physics level. It connects across through the trunk. And this seems to be this actual concept of servant leadership. If you're actually doing your best engineering as an individual contributor in a group, not alone, in a mob. I don't know how many of you have actually done mob. It's probably the best way to develop ever. One person drives, they type or weld or hold the robot part together. And another 2, 3, 4 people cheer for them. They cheer them on. They give them advice if they need it, but maybe that person's already very senior and doesn't need advice. They cheer them on. Their primary benefit is to increase the confidence of the driver, to make them have a good time, a good experience, because the work is intense. So you have these people cheering for you, and everyone rotates being the driver. So it's not like one person just sits back and watches. You have this engagement through truly trying to praise the driver, and then the driver rotates every maybe 7 minutes. It depends on what the work is, whether it's physical, virtual, or whatever we're doing. And you learn really fast because you know you're going to be driver soon. So you can't really check out mentally. You can't really just observe. And you're watching in detail because you're also looking for defects. You're also doing quality check as you go. And then you're the driver. And even if it's your first time using a machine or using a piece of software or creating a piece of software or creating a machine, by the time you've done that for a few hours, you have some understandings of the basics of what's going on, or at least how to test it, how to test the system. And if you've joined a similar mob for a few weeks, you might actually have a fairly functional level of knowledge on a very new topic. And if you've done it for a few years, like Elon has, at the Boring Company that's tunneling and geology, SpaceX, Neuralink, OpenAI, and Tesla, you have radical cross-functionality. And compared to normal humans, who most of us live in presentation or PowerPoint land, you're like a superhero. And that allows you to actually be a servant leader, like what we really want a servant leader to mean. So if someone asks, what is leadership at Tesla? I'd say it's attempting to be the ultimate model of a contributor towards the company mission, holding yourselves accountable to the company mission. So that's the tip of this pink arrow. We can go into that if that's where the questions take us. So how to be Musk, if you wanted to be, if you're even allowed. So let me introduce this better. If Elon Musk joined most of our companies, almost anyone here in this video chat, but not as the owner, like not as the board above the board or the constituent board member, but say as just the CEO, beholden to the board, likely Elon would be fired in less than a week, right? So most of us can't be like Elon Musk unless we own the entity. It's too aggressive a way of doing work. I mean, imagine if Elon walked in, but not as the owner, and said, we're not going to have any leaders anymore. Everyone's going to be paid the same. Bonuses are gone. Elon would be, it's like what happened to Dice at Volkswagen. I mean, just trying to introduce a real agile transformation, you get thrown out by the union. So we can't be Elon Musk in most of our companies unless we're in an owning position. Like truly, the majority voting shares have our back. But if you wanted to, how would you do it? Well, here's what Elon did. Generate as much working capital as you can. Use 100% of it to execute on your mission. Work 12 hours a day. Yes, I did 12-hour shifts at Tesla. Actually, I did longer than that. With anyone who will work with you in mobs, doing the engineering. Own no house, sleep in the factory. Here's a quote from Elon. My proceeds from PayPal were 180 million US. I put 100 million US into SpaceX, 10 million US into Solar City, 70 million US into Tesla. I borrowed money for rent. Now, Elon also bought a $1 billion supercar. I mean, he did do the, like, I'm the flashy new Silicon Valley brilliant starlet for a little while. He totally did. He did wing walking on airplanes. He bought a jet, learned to fly a jet. He did later sell all those things and now owns almost nothing. So he did go back to very ascetic, like monk style life. But no, he did test glory first. He tried traditional successes first. So it's not like he never did any of that. But he did get on the other side of that. He owns no house. Elon sleeps in the factory. Elon lives in the factory now. Factories. He goes to whichever factory is currently thought to be the bottleneck, which is sad for me because almost the entire time that I worked in Tesla, Elon was at SpaceX. And I visited SpaceX. I collaborated with SpaceX, but I don't have these awesome stories of like Elon and I holding hands and running through a field and saying, there's an agile team. There's an agile team. Like, that's not really how it worked. He was almost always at SpaceX. And tragically, the day after my son's birthday, Elon was in my primary work zone the whole day. And I was like, man, okay, I missed that chance. But anyway, I'm still proud of the contribution I had and the people I met. With that, I'd like to see if we can become more collaborative. There's how many of us? 124 of us right now, according to the Zoom login number. So I don't know if we can be so egalitarian as to have people just unmute and talk. And we could try it if we're really brave. Or maybe people type in the chat. Oh, awesome. Thank you, Michael, for putting a definition of mob into the chat. But I'd like to, I have what, like a week's worth of content here, maybe more. Hopefully we don't just only dive into content, but I hope I have content for wherever the conversation takes us across what's made for executives, how I do Agile hardware and software together now, even what I think a product owner or a Scrum Master has become. There's just plenty. It's all gamified now, which is probably a good thing. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. But maybe we try typing in the chat. Crisp Crew, how do you recommend we make this more collaborative?
We could get some questions in the chat, but we could also, if people want to raise their hands and ask them in person, that would also be fine.
Much better, much better. If you're okay with that, I'd prefer it. That way we actually get to know each other a little bit. And I think we're hoping to do a live event at the CRISP facilities in March. And then a follow-on event either the days before, the day after in Finland, in Helsinki, in collaboration between CRISP and I hope Nitor Delta. I hope, I mean, it is to be determined, but I hope that means some of us will meet each other in person in Stockholm or in Helsinki. So good for us to actually talk to each other. We'll remember each other better, maybe. So if that's okay, yes, please.
Okay, so we got some questions. We also have a raised hand, but I think the questions in the chat was first. So we start there, I think. We have one question here. What's the secret sauce for Agile Hardware? Easy question, right?
Wow, okay. So this 12-step program is about that. I think all 12 steps are probably required. The manufacturing aspects is only one of the 12 steps, and that's what I call XM, or extreme manufacturing. For most hardware groups, the actual production machinery and production teams, production staff, production shifts, they don't want change. They've optimized to make the same thing as many times as they can. In fact, they've even used some lean practices to eliminate variance. 6 sigmas, 6 decimal places worth of no variance, right? That's been highly constrained. So they don't want new designs. So how do you introduce practices, policies, DNA, culture into the factories, the production centers, so they want new designs? And the best I know about it is these 11 extreme manufacturing principles. I actually wrote those before I joined Tesla from my own hobby company, Wikispeed, but I've updated them since then. I'll zoom in all the way, so if somebody wants to, they can screen capture. This is also my book, chapter 12. Oh, here, there's a better place to zoom in. I have some text about it. Here, let me exit presentation mode. I'll move this pink here. If someone wanted to screen capture, this is, man, that font's small. I'm not sure any of that's legible. It's also chapter 10 of my book. The factory practices, the factory culture, the factory DNA seem to be required for the factory to even be willing to accept new designs. Then the questions are, how do we get designs multiple times a day? As mentioned, Tesla introduces 60 new parts a day, and not like different color bolts, like different airbags, different silicon with embedded software, different alloys of metal, different metal parts, different seat cushions, different glass every day. I mean, truly the level of change that would be restricted to every 2.5 years at least by any other car company on planet Earth right now. And SpaceX does the same thing. So the manufacturing practices are likely step one. Then we have the digital self-management pieces that allow us to have not so much wait time on procurement decisions, on machine setup decisions, on material choices, any of the stack up of decisions that would wait in a queue for an engineering or product introduction coalition. That changes the way the factory is laid out, the physical layout of the factory, which is part of the fast company practice. It changes the way communication is done. The modular architecture of the hardware product is important, but in summary, it's like this. We tried to design the product not as a monolithic whole, but as an attractive, I hope, collection of modules, each with inputs and outputs. And the modules themselves are reinvented as fast as we possibly can. This allows for massively parallel concurrent execution, which is something Bill Gates has been pushing since the 80s, for example. So the modular piece matters. How teams communicate inside those module teams matters. How they do mob matters. How the contracts are written. I mean, all around the world, most contracts by default say things like the vendor must ensure that written notice is received at least 9 months before the effective date of the scheduled date of the implementation of any change. That means we couldn't have change from that vendor faster than every 9 months. That's the absolute shortest iteration cycle. And that's just a stock contract that most of us wouldn't question. So we would need to introduce Agile contracts like the Musk companies do. And for me, that's what I would now teach in something as basic as a product owner course anymore, is what are Agile contracts? Because that's what I want product owners to be managing, vendor relationships and the money, if you even have product owners. The Musk companies don't have product owners, not anymore. They do something totally different. So the brief answer of how do you get Agile hardware? The most simple I've got it is it's a 12-step plan, and they all matter. But maybe when most of us think hardware, we first think of the factory. So I tried to introduce that first, factory practices. But I think all of these would be required if we were going to get hardware releases to more than one time a day, like the Musk companies do. I'm sorry, that's not a complete answer. This is likely at least the backbone of the event we'll do in March at CRISP. So you could take the course with me online in November, or in person. It will likely be an Agile hardware and software and management class, I hope in March. So we could do that in person in Stockholm or Helsinki if you like. I hope that gave you something to think on.
Okay, thanks. We have a question from Christina. Would you like to share it, put it live?
Yeah, sure. Yes, I was wondering about the salary, and if, as you said, the salary is not tied to like the kind of role you will claim, but does that mean everyone had the same salary and everyone got the same addition? This is a question I think is very, very difficult being a manager today, and not one that I like either. So that was my question.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you for going to the tough questions right away. I appreciate it. I'll zoom in on launch here a little bit. Yes, to try to be clear and concise, the Musk companies are an experiment in universal basic income. Almost everyone makes right about $20 an hour, which is really low, especially in the Bay Area, where I spent most of my time working for Tesla. What you get instead are awesome stock options, truly legendary stock options. It's a formula, but essentially what it is everyone has the same purchasing capability, and they get the stock at about 16% less than its lowest value in the last 6 months. And Tesla stock goes way up and way down and way up and way down, and that works in your favor. Because whatever the lowest it was in about the last 6 months, there's an incremental moving period, you get 16% under that, or at least that's what it was when I was an employee. So you make money no matter what on stock. And what that means is really the only way to make money is to buy stock as fast as you can with your employee discount. Because of that, many of the people I worked with already had $1 million US. And they continued working because they liked the work and they believed in the mission. So think about that type of culture now. A lot of the people around you could retire at any time, at least at some level. And they choose to be there because they actually like the work or are mission driven. It's maybe the most fun company culture I've ever had a chance to be a part of. So that's the short answer. But you don't have to only take my word for it. Here's Ted Malaska, Senior Director of Application Software at SpaceX. Wait a minute, Joe, didn't you just say there's no promotions and there's no salary difference? How is this Ted person Senior Director of Application Software? There's 2 Agile people operations groups like HR. And one of the services they provide to everyone in real time is they give you a title to use externally that approximately matches what you know about. So if you leave the company, you're employable somewhere else. And they do that constantly. They provide titles to you. Inside the company, you essentially have no title. You're just person. So Ted writes from SpaceX, someone from my old company interviewed today at SpaceX. They asked, what are the major differences between the 2 companies? Here was my answer. You know all those product managers, project managers, agile managers, and architects? Yeah, we don't have those. You know all those politics, product increment planning, telephone games, and long debates about nothing? Yeah, we don't have those. In short, we trust engineers and put them in front of the problem. The result is about 10 to 20 times more output per engineer. I actually believe that's completely true. More ownership and an increased feeling of meaning as the work is directly related to the outcome. Oh yeah, we are going to Mars instead of optimizing for taking money from people. So there's that. This really matches my experience in the company. So to summarize it again, it's a lot like large scale Scrum. Maybe Elon's the one product owner, maybe. And then you have mobs and mobs and mobs and mobs and mobs and mobs. Yeah, it's probably a lot like that. Okay, Christina, did I answer the essential parts of your question?
Yes.
Or did I miss a part?
Yes, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. So let's keep on talking about the mobs. How do you collaborate or coordinate across mobs? It's a question from Tara.
Okay, I'm going to zoom out here. Thank you, Tara. And explore part of the section on module, one of the 12 steps of digitalization. Where do I have this part? So each mob team owns a module, and you join different mobs anytime. No one tells you what to do. In fact, each day you walk in at 5 a.m. or 5 p.m. And no matter what your title is, you come in at 5 a.m. or 5 p.m. and you join a mob, and you can join a different mob every day. There's this large list of the available mobs that's continually updating, and you can propose a new mob from an app on your phone. Some of you have seen sessions where I talked about that in more detail. So you choose a mob, and a mob is around a module. And the modules have an interface. And a simple way to think about these modules, the way I'm talking about them, is like a laptop and a USB cable and a mouse or a printer. We can change the laptop, or we can change the printer or mouse. As long as there's a USB cable between them, it works. That's the idea of the interface, to make these things not dependent on each other. You can change them in any order. And ideally, that's how these interfaces work. Okay, so how do we communicate across these mobs? If teams share an interface, they choose to work within 3 meters of each other. So you have these large buildings where people are doing 3D CAD, stress testing, physical testing, machining prototype parts, even making production parts, or trying to. And if Crisp Crew and I are working on brake calipers, and if Anders and Manjit and Henrik are working on the steering knuckle that the brake caliper attaches to, I don't know how many of you are car enthusiasts. These are car parts that connect. Okay, so they share an interface. They're parts of the things that hold wheels on. We would be within 3 meters of each other. Then we would regularly join each other's mobs to share knowledge and skill. Interfaces can and do change multiple times a day, and everyone can see the new versions of the interfaces and their tests. We'll see them checked in, because tests get checked in. Tests are digital. Even if they move robots, the programming for the robot is code that's checked in. So you can see the new version checked in on monitors that are above everybody's head as it scrolls up. So the communication is primarily through proximity and iMessage. Almost all communication is done through iMessage, or if you use an Android device, the encrypted messaging app called Signal. A lot of the people I worked with in Tesla did not know what their email address was. They simply used email so little, they didn't even know what it was. Some people had never logged into their Tesla email. It was iMessage or Signal. And the reason why is those force short character counts. So you can't have this long email. You have to really think, what am I trying to say, and fire it off. So you get this short message while you're in a mob. You could glance at your phone and maybe type something quickly back. That tool is over there. I'll join your mob in around 15 minutes. Right? This is the level of communication. And for depth of communication, that happens from joining each other's mobs. Making that easy is why teams work in proximity from each other. And this is why, a primary reason why, Musk has banned remote work. Highly controversial. A lot of other companies say, why would you possibly do that? Well, if you're introducing 60 new parts a day with embedded software on them, I'm not sure you could do it remote. Elon has very harsh language about that. Elon says people can go pretend to work for someone else. Like he's very aggressive language. Yeah, Elon takes a stance. Did I get to some of the coordination? So there's definitely a lot, not like a chief mob owner or anything like that, or a mob architect or anything. Teams truly do self-organize. And the reason I think they're able to do that is because of the Agile DNA, the 4-hour onboarding and the anti-handbook handbook, which some of you have seen other talks where I've discussed that in more detail.
Great. We will continue on the topic of mobbing, but then we will be using the Swedish word mobbing, which means bullying. So we have a question from Malte about bullying. Are you willing to unmute and ask a question yourself,
Of course.
Malte?
Thank you very much.
Perfect, thank you.
Welcome. I'm happy to be here. Thanks a lot for that. Employees of Valve, the computer games company, complained that the lack of structure made the company feel like a school with lots of bullies. Was that a feeling you had at Tesla, or was there not? And why do you think not, if that's the case?
Okay, I did not experience anything that felt like bullying, but I also never worked in Valve, so I'm not exactly sure what those employees might have experienced. Now I've read some of the famous case studies and read the famous Valve publication about how they say they work, but I didn't go inside Valve, so I can't speak. I did not experience bullying, and there's a good side and a really bad side to this. This is actually one of the toughest parts for me about working for Elon Musk. But it did prevent bullying. You are invisible. You are a cog. You are a bullet in a gun. And so is Elon. And I think the only reason it's sustainable, and it is sustainable, weirdly enough, it's actually very joyful, is because you see Elon doing it too. Someone's not profiting on you. The money is put directly back into production. It's probably the most efficient company I've ever seen financially. Like, people hold themselves accountable to not buying an extra pair of earplugs. That might sound abusively lean. I'd say people just care. Like, no one would hold you back from buying a 300,000 euro robot at all. No one would even delay you for 10 seconds. If you thought that was the right thing to do it immediately. How can I help you do it faster? But people really hold themselves to a high standard about fiduciary responsibility, about being cheap. Like even earplugs or work gloves, you would use the same ones until they were in tatters. Well, until they weren't safe, right? And then you discard them, you keep safety up. But I think that's why there was no bullying, because everyone is basically invisible. LGBTQ, lesbian, bi, transgender, gay, etc., have ranked the Musk companies the #1 and #2 places to work more than 7 years running. I don't remember how many years it is now. It might be 9 years by now, every year. It's at least 7 years in a row. And marginalized groups who might feel victims of bullying in other companies really like it because you're invisible. Only your output matters. Now, at the same time, maybe it's not human or humane. It does feel very unhuman. You are a bullet in a gun. No one says congratulations, or almost no one. I mean, people jump and high five. That happens. That's pretty cool. And that does feel good. I mean, when your mob it's truly releasing product multiple times a day, like a more efficient heat pump, more than one time a day, you know, that's epic. You know, other companies spend 3 years to do that. And so you jump and high five with each other, but that's it. I mean, truly, that's it. There are no promotions, right? I mean, it doesn't go anywhere. No one has a birthday party for you. They'll say happy birthday, but no one would take time to stop work to have a party, right? That would just never happen. Be viewed as like criminal. You are a cog. So I'd say, I don't think there's bullying because it's invisible who's in a marginalized or preferred group. And as a result, there aren't marginalized or preferred groups in my experience. I never saw that at all. Like, I'm a very tall person. I'm fairly well spoken. Some people even say I'm handsome. It didn't matter at all in Tesla. It was invisible. It was only output, period, end of sentence. But I think this is an opportunity for teams to go beyond what the Musk companies are, is to try to bring the humanity, the style. The best I've seen is Agile Lean Europe, the ALE conferences and Agile testing days, where there's a track for kids. And it's not like a separate kids track where they just play with toys. It's actually, if there's a talk on less and Kanban or disciplined Agile delivery or whatever in the main track, there's a kids version of that, of less or Kanban or disciplined Agile in simpler words to the kids that someone volunteered to give. So it's actually attempting to be the same experience, but age appropriate. I think that level of inclusivity of age and people of different energy levels and dietary needs is awesome, and something I did not experience in the Musk companies. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Sure.
Okay, we have a question from Helena. I'm going to try to combine it here with the one from Michelle, because Helena asks, how do people go about finding the most valuable thing to work on? And I have an assumption it might have to do with bottlenecks. So Michelle's question is, what is the process for determining the bottlenecks of the day?
Okay, there's two different parts to that. The digital self-management is on monitors just above head height all over every Tesla facility, all over Fremont, California, all over Shanghai, all over Berlin, Giga-Bradenburg, all over the facility in the Netherlands. Is it in Tilburg? There's actually a huge facility in the Netherlands, but it doesn't get as much press recently. All over all the facilities, you have these large monitors just above your head, and it's also available on your phone when you're an employee. And those show you, at one level, they show you flow. So that's how you would detect where a bottleneck is likely to be. Now, research and development and production and maintenance in the Musk companies are not divided. They are the same. For example, if we're making heat pumps, there'd be 10 different places in these buildings where heat pumps are made, and they'd be making different versions. They'd have to meet a baseline of quality and performance, and they'd have to be compatible. The interface would have to be compatible with the cars. But they are allowed to be unique, every single one. So that means if David, Katrina, Arvind had an idea for a more efficient heat pump, they would go to one of those points of production and take it offline. So one of the 10 about points of production making heat pumps, and they would try to improve the design, and they would try to make a prototype heat pump that's tested to be better than the previous version. And they try to do that as fast as they could. So depending what that changes, they might even have one ready today, maybe. Maybe they think if we put more copper here, more insulation here, and change the software here, we think it might be meaningfully more efficient. So they might even have results that day. If they do, their automated tests on their innovation, and if that heat pump passes the automated tests, it's sold that day. So there is one car that day with a more efficient heat pump. And now it's that same group's job to try to figure out how to do the production ramp, increase the number of heat pumps they make, either that day or the next day. Well, can we make 12 of them? Can we make 1,000 of them? And you try to have whatever is the most efficient version ramp. And each team can see the efficiency of the heat pumps tests and the other 10 points of production. So they know if they're now the weak product and they should try to reevaluate theirs or shut down their point of production and join a more efficient one. And that's this digital self-management. So because R&D and production and maintenance are the same, you truly can see most types of bottlenecks by looking at flow through these facilities, whether it's rocket production or heat pump production or the whole car or Tesla insurance. You can often see the bottleneck by looking at flow diagrams and the number of seconds things spend different places. And because R&D is done in production. Okay, so that gives you an idea. That's the digital self-management. Then the second part is, how do you self-allocate? Even if you know where the bottleneck is, how do you self-allocate? I'll zoom in on step 2 of 12, the Justice Board. Every day, employees walk into Tesla and SpaceX facilities and choose their own project. No manager tells them what project they must join. Employees would recruit each other via iMessage and Signal. The available projects are displayed to everyone. These boards had no name. Since retiring from Tesla, I updated the concept with auto sorting, an all-up view, more levels of color coding, and some additional business rules. And now I call that the Justice Board. Please forgive me. I brazenly named this concept after me. But let me also be clear, in Tesla, they had no name. They were the boards. Employees can propose additional projects for the Justice Board at any time. I have many, many pictures of the Justice Boards and video, but until Tesla releases those, I choose not to. Instead, I've drawn one here. Now in Tesla, each row would be all you'd see, and it would rotate. The monitor would rotate to another project. The important aspects are for each project, you see how much money it's spending, how fast that project is spending money, and that's automatically calculated, and it's not perfectly correct. The point is, the people doing the work are never asked for expense reports. They're never asked for timesheets. You want the people doing the work mobbing. You want 12 hours a day of mobbing. Okay, well, this is important. A lot of you are in the EU. How does 12-hour workdays work? Well, Giga Bradenburg, Giga Berlin does. You work 3 12-hour days and you have 4 days off. So you're less than the maximum threshold for the week. Some people think there's an hourly a day limit. In most countries, in most cities, in most jurisdictions, that's only if you divide it by 5. So it's 12 hours times 3. You have a 36-hour work week and you have 4 days off. Now, you are allowed to keep working if you choose to, and some people do. Elon Musk does. Elon's there pretty much 7 days a week for 12 hours a day. And some people choose to do that. They actually love it. Some people don't. Some people work 3 days and then they have 4 days off. Okay, so that's these shifts. So you want people mobbing, not doing expense reports, not losing focus or context switching away from doing the mob. So it's guessed. The expenses of each row, each project are guessed for you and they're displayed. Then you in the team, the humans propose a value metric. And that changes in stages. The first value metric for autopilot was, can we even turn the wheels based by software? You know, like, can we do anything based on software? And then eventually the value statements increase to how safe is it keeping lane on different roads in different countries, you know, different kilometers, square kilometers on the surface of the earth. So the value algorithm that's relied on humans. It's definitely not perfect and it changes over time. So you have value divided by approximated expenses, and you see that for every project. So you have real-time financial estimates of each row, and that gives you an efficiency metric towards the company mission. For Tesla, the mission is the number of days, shortening the number of days until the last internal combustion engine is sold. That is the one goal of the company inside. Everything is measured against that. Reducing the number of days, guessed, that's a guessed number, reducing the number of days until the last internal combustion engine is sold. And this is why, although I'm a fan of electric vehicles, And I'm currently an advisor to Mercedes-Benz. I don't currently own a Mercedes-Benz because they're still funding gasoline engines. They just announced the next V8. Whereas if you buy a Tesla, 100% of that revenue goes to even trying to help other companies shorten the number of days until the last internal combustion engine is sold. Okay, so you have this mapping towards the mission of the company. And that gives you a ranking of their efficiency. And it's not perfect. These formulas are made by people and they change and they're not perfect, but it gives you a rough ranking of projects. So if your project is really low on the justice board, you know you should probably be working on kaikaku, on big change, or abandoning that project. And if your project is currently at the top level, you know it's probably safe to just focus on ramping, making more and more and more, or increasing even minutiae efficiencies because you're already, you know, the core productivity of the business. So you have this all-up view of projects, and this is what you look at when you join, when you walk in each day to join.
All right, let's take Anders in the room. Would you like to unmute, please?
Is it me?
Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking you make, or the Tesla, Elon Musk's company makes a lot of new innovative stuff. But if you are manufacturing like stuff that is being used by others, you have external requirements, external deadlines, and so on. How would this kind of attitude and workplace map to that type of external requirements and deadlines?
The Tesla Model S steering rack, that's made by Bosch. That's a Bosch part made in Germany. And Tesla has an Agile contract since 2010 with Bosch that says we want a different steering rack design, an updated steering rack, not just design, we want the design updated and you ship hardware we will use every 1 week. So that's an Agile contract between Tesla and Bosch saying, we will keep buying your steering racks, Bosch, but we're sending you the analytics of how these cars are driven and how it appears the people in the car and drivers of the car are reacting based on your product and how these parts are wearing. And we would like each batch, each 1 week batch of thousands of steering racks to be an updated design based on the analytics from the previous week. And that's what prompted former CEO of Bosch, Volkmar Denner, to call my mobile phone. To say, Volkmar called my phone years ago and said, we need to learn Agile Hardware. There's this startup Silicon Valley company that wants us to update the steering racks every 1 week, and we want to do it. We're interested in working with this funny, small Silicon Valley car company. Let's do it. And there's a picture of me with the Scrum Master. They started with Scrum. They don't use Scrum anymore, I don't think, in Bosch. But the Scrum Master at that time of the steering rack team, we're holding one of the steering racks. I think we were in Stuttgart. Just awesome experience. So some suppliers do it, at least in part of the companies like Bosch, because they have to, because they're asked to be agile. But what if we're not asked to be agile? Well, that's what SpaceX does. Nobody is asking SpaceX to be agile. Companies that want their satellites put into orbit are asking for booking a ride into space. And they're used to doing it on a specific date at a specific time. And so most rocket companies, Ariane Group, United Launch Alliance, Airbus, most aerospace companies, they're used to that. They sign a contract to put satellites into space. They're a supplier to make a rocket to put satellites into space, to put stuff into space. And then they build their rocket at that time to match the mission. I mean, it's like making custom shoes to fit someone's feet, right? And that's how most aerospace companies work, like an old cobbler model. Well, what SpaceX does is they make a new Starship rocket, the whole rocket, new design, new software, new alloys, every month. Every month, the largest rocket on planet Earth is made again. They're on Starship 27 now. They've been at this for 27 months. They're on Starship 27 now. They don't have booked launches that fast. In fact, the launches are still being booked on the previous platform on Falcon. So the Musk companies have to self-fund their iterations. And instead they sell rides on the product. So the customers don't know what rocket is going to put their satellite into space. It's like booking a taxi ride. The business model is different. So being a supplier, an Agile supplier, the contract does change. And that's what SpaceX does. They're a supplier to satellite people that like satellites all around the world. And instead, they've had to change their contract from saying this rocket built this way with these materials, with this large plan up front for this many 100 million euro. Instead, it's here's your cost per kilogram. One of our rockets is going to put you into space within this launch window, weather permitting. And I'm not sure how many of you know, to book a launch, to book a ride on a SpaceX rocket, you actually do it through an app on your phone. You or I all could. We can go to spacex.com. You can download the app for iOS or Android, and you can book a number of kilograms on a launch, and you can pay for it through your phone. You can pay in Doge and it'll launch it into space. It's just like booking an Uber or a Lyft, or a BlaBlaCar. So the model, the contract does change. If we have a traditional waterfall contract as a supplier, it would probably be difficult. We'd get a lot of pushback and friction to try to be agile.
Thank you. Next question is from Jana. Let's see if Jana would like to join and ask a question.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm thinking in all this brilliance, it's amazing, the mission, obviously, for the greater good, product excellence and excellent execution. At this level, I'm wondering, well, first question, are there problems? And in that case, what are those?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, there are problems. Some are the problems that all companies experience, like the supply chain disruptions, the chip crunch, et cetera. Now, how a company this agile deals with them is pretty inspiring, right? The theory of anti-fragility is if your cost to make change is really low, change becomes a competitive advantage, whereas it's damaging to your competitors. And that's what we've seen. In the last year, every car company on earth produced less cars than the year before, blaming it on the supply chain crunch, except Tesla. They increased production. So that's your theory of anti-fragility. It seems to work. Okay. So you have the same problems as everyone else, and maybe you can handle them well if your cost to make change is lower. Okay, what are problems that are unique to this model? One is, as I said, I found it to be inhuman. If you're marginalized and you're used to abuse or are running from abuse, it's a haven. If you're a privileged group, it's probably horrible. But in any case, I think it could get a lot better. It could be a lot more human. Another is the Musk companies are not inclusive to people with different energy levels, really, it's all about your output. So what if you're someone who has 2 really high energy, clear thinking hours a day? For whatever reason, maybe a medical condition, whatever it is, there's no place for you in a Musk company right now. And I think that's a real missed opportunity. I think that's a problem because of this level of focus and intensity. And I think that's something that we here on this call can move beyond and maybe introduce back into the Musk companies and everyone else. That's one of my personal passion projects, is how to have it so kids, adults, people who are sick, people of all different capabilities could be a useful part if they wanted to. And this comes up almost every single, probably every investor call that I've been on. Someone in the open Q&A part says, I'm already a shareholder. I'm saving up to buy a Tesla, or I already have one. I wear SpaceX merchandise, like I have a SpaceX backpack. Like, I'm really trying to be supportive. I talk to my friends and family about sustainable energy, and I want to put solar on our condo building. I'm talking to the board of the condo about getting solar on our building. Like, they're really trying to do it. And they say, how can I contribute? And they ask Elon directly, how can I contribute? And Elon always answers, Well, you're already doing a great job. Thank you. Like, there's just no door for you. When I became known as a Musk employee, my Twitter feed blew up with people saying, I have this idea I want to contribute to Tesla. I'll do it for free. How do I get it into the company? Because people are like really want to continue helping, and there's no door for that. I think my previous company that I still do for fun, Wikispeed, maybe has a pretty good egalitarian model for that, for being inclusive, more like Wikipedia, where people can sign up, sign a waiver, aspire to a quality standard, and be like an author, like a Wikipedia author, and anyone in the world could do it. That might be one solution. I'm open to more. So that's one, is they're not inclusive enough. Then another problem of this system, well, another effect of this system is you have multiple designs all the time. Because there's not central architecture, you have more than one design of the doors at any given time. Now, this is radical innovation. You get new door designs, like something as old and traditional as a door. You get new door designs weekly or faster, and they are cheaper and faster to make and hold paint better, et cetera, et cetera. But what this also means is you have a continual reintroduction of beginner level problems. Many people write, they bought a new 140,000 euro sports sedan from Tesla, and it's the fastest car in the world, and in some conditions it can sort of drive itself and all kinds of neat things. But one of the four doors, when they close it, it sticks. And they say, why on a car this expensive is one of my doors, do I have to slam it shut? Just why is that a thing? Why haven't they figured it out? And it's because you're continually reintroducing new minor improvements, sometimes major improvements, even in things as basic as doors, and really basic issues come back again and again and again, like doors that stick. Like that's a thing that happens. It actually does happen. Yeah. So that's one of the effects of this.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad to hear they have challenges as well.
Thank you, Jana. I think there's a lot the Musk companies can learn from everybody else. I think the world has a long way it can keep getting better if we want it to. Thank you, Jana.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one more question here. So from Michelle Anderson, what is the implication for maintaining Tesla vehicles if each part can be unique? Does the efficiency extend to service after the sale?
Okay, I'll zoom in on part of modules. How do you maintain something for all cars when there could be thousands of versions? Modules and interfaces help. So I'll zoom in on a service example here. I hope this can get big enough that people can read it. Tesla technicians are trained on the interfaces, not every module and the hundreds of versions. An example maintenance flow, step 1, Tesla Analytics detect a possible problem or the customer requests service from an app on their mobile phone. Step 2, a service car, like this one up here, travels to the car location and they swap the defective module as fast as possible in the field. Step 3, the defective module is brought back to the factory for regression testing. Step 4, the defective module is recycled. Now we can see this in the current postings for Tesla service technicians. Service technician level 1 says in groups, you're going to be switching modules, and sometimes you'll do it alone. By service technician level 3, which is largely the same salary, you're bringing the modules back into the factory and you're joining the mobs to redesign the parts based on what you learned about the wear characteristics in the field. There's no distinction between being a service tech and a new product designer at all. I mean, really, once you're in the company, titles don't matter. Most of the time you don't have titles. Those are for external use. So the service model really is agile. And I think it's the modularity that makes that practical.
Okay, Per, you have a hand raised in the meeting. Would you like to ask them?
Yeah, the question is regarding like new big things like the Tesla semi-truck and Cybertruck and so on. How I understand how this works with kind of improving a product, existing product. How does it work for new large initiatives?
Another downside, maybe, to Jana's point before, is you may have noticed the overall exterior shape of the Tesla Model S is basically the same as when the chassis was introduced in 2010 as the White Star, before it even got the name Model S. Despite massive changes to every module, the overall architecture is similar, very similar. So when it's very inexpensive to make module level changes, there's less need to do a major redesign like most car companies do every 5 to 7 years. I mean, the Tesla Model S is already the highest horsepower car you can buy. It's the quickest car 0 to 60 on planet Earth, 0 to 100 kilometers an hour on planet Earth. And that's through module level change. So incremental change is simpler. Dramatic change works from any mob proposing a new project through an app on their phone, for example, the Cybertruck. And that's how the Cybertruck was proposed. Maybe we should consider a truck. And if it has these rough value statements, here's why it might be useful to the company mission. Anybody does that and attempts to compose some type of value formula that justifies it. Now, that said, if someone is found to be gaming the system, proposing a fraudulent or arbitrary value formula, they would be talked to, they'd be coached just by other employees. Other employees who are concerned would say, I think your value statement is inappropriate, let's change it. And if someone was truly nefarious and trying to misdirect company resources, then they would be eliminated, right? Even in Giga Bradenburg, Giga Berlin, where it's difficult to fire. Remember, it's difficult to fire people after they've been there 5 years, 10 years. It gets progressively more difficult. Giga Bradenburg, Giga Berlin is very new. No one has tenure yet. They all can still be fired. So at least for now, the Musk companies can still have this very severe penalty if they choose to. Okay, so breakthrough large projects are simply proposed. And maybe I can use an even larger example, even larger, the gigafactories. And these are some of the largest enclosed spaces on planet Earth. So there's Giga Berlin, Giga Texas, Giga Shanghai, Giga New York, the Fremont factory where I spent most of my time, Giga Nevada, Tilburg, Netherlands, the supercharger factory, and the pyramids of Giza for scale. And this is how huge these things are. These are really big places, making a lot of product, and the new design happens in the facilities. Okay, Giga Texas, you can look at the public records of who bought the land. It wasn't Elon Musk. It wasn't Tesla. It was an employee. An employee said, well, this is a really good deal on land and we need more space. I'd better buy it. Like, that's the level of authority you have. And you can see that on the public land records. I think I even have a sequence of pictures of it somewhere. Yeah, I do. Here's Giga Texas, the day the land was bought. The day the purchase went through, the land was leveled and cleared, the same day. And it was bought by an employee. Like, that's how these big projects start. People are like, we need this and I'm trusted, so I better do it. You don't like ask Elon Musk, like you do it. Then 90 days later, we have what's called a factory fabric. It's a repeating sequence of modules, 3-dimensionally. They stack 3 or 4 high. And they're kitted on site, and each one is different. Each module in the factory fabric is different because the metal you can get changes, supply chain challenges are real. As long as they connect to each other, and more than one group is kitting these modules at once. It's not like there's the one factory fabric team. That'd be way too slow. Suppliers make some of these, Tesla employees make some of these. And as long as they connect together, they're used. Now, they have solar panels put on them as fast as they're made, and to some extent their own water treatment. So if we zoom in on the factory fabric, we can see that 90 days after the land was bought, they're already producing production car parts. And this happened in Giga Bradenburg, Giga Berlin. Tesla, before they even had a permit, had a significant portion of that facility in Europe built. And if the permit was declined, they would have had to scrap the whole building. But they didn't wait. They hoped and built as fast as they could. And they were building parts. They were building Model Ys. There were complete Tesla Model Ys being built in Giga Berlin, Giga Brandenburg before the facility even had a permit. And I think it was last month, the EU government said, okay, you can sell those cars you already built. So all those cars were then later sold, right? And that was like 100 days after the first wall went up. It's just incredibly quick. So large projects are simply self-managed by passionate employees who are trusted.
Thank you so much, Joe. We have so many more interesting questions in the chat as well. Can you recommend some, how can they get answered from you?
Oh, yes, please. I currently have a 100% response rate on Twitter. LinkedIn and Zing is also great. My Twitter is @JoeJustice. If you tag @CrispAB on LinkedIn or Twitter and tag me, please someone take responsibility for downloading what's in the Zoom chat before it clears and seeing if there's other people that wanted to say something. If you tag @CrispAB and tag me on LinkedIn, Zing, Facebook, Twitter, I'll intend to give the most thoughtful response I can. The advantage of it being on a public forum like that is you won't just get my answer. I'm willing to be wrong. Other former Tesla or current Tesla or SpaceX employees might also respond, and they might have a better answer than me. And some of you deeply experienced organizational coaches, trainers, people with your own company experience might have better models than what I've experienced working for Elon Musk. And I'd love to learn those. So if your question is sensitive, yeah, you could email me. I'm joe@abiagile.com. But hopefully your question can be public or your comment can be public so I can learn and we can see input from other people. I've got my whole social media credentials somewhere in here. Yeah, bang. There on this alien abduction UFO. So please tag CrispAB and please tag me, and let's try not to miss any comment or question. Thank you very much.
We also have a suggestion from Craig. He's saying that he's asking if you are able to share this content to Wiki or similar.
This content is fine for anyone to use for any format, even if you sell it, as long as it still says Joe Justice on it. Yeah, use with attribution is awesome. Go nuts. If you want to, if there's something in here that's helpful, go for it. Now, since it's in Miro and it's very big, even trying to save it as a graphic, you can't zoom in on the smallest text. You can see the biggest text and some of the medium-sized text, but the smallest text is not visible, even in Miro's absolute highest resolution export. If I do export as PDF, it does it in pages, not just one big PDF. And it's very difficult to navigate because it's so big. And this is just one. This is the digitalization hardware and software course, right? That's not even talking about how to move towards this from an executive standpoint or how to get started in this. I'll call that a Scrum Master course, but it doesn't have much to do with Scrum anymore. Or how to do contracts and finances, which is what I'd call the product owner course. So I'm not sure how to get it out of this format in a usable way. If somebody has a good idea, please tweet it at me and I will try it. And already any screen captures you took during this session are awesome. My face is fine to reuse. If someone else's face is in your screen capture, please blur their face or ask them if it's okay to use that image. But yeah, please tweet at me if you have an idea of how to make a meaningful export.
Great. Okay, before we hang up, just wanted to tell you all that next week, Thursday, October 6th, we will have Mr. Complexity himself, or Mr. Canevin Model. That means it's time for Dave Snowden to speak. The timing will be a little bit earlier than today. It will be 5 o'clock Stockholm time, or let's see, 11 o'clock New York time. Anything else from anyone else?
Yes, please unmute and say goodbye before you check out of this meeting, like we did last time. It's so lovely to hear voices from all over.
Thanks so much.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Cheers.
Bye.